Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And in this video, I'm gonna do my first political rant. Yes, my first political rant. Now, this is probably an easy one that a lot of you guys probably figured it out. So what I'm gonna talk about is the trade wars that the media claims it to be between the US and China, right? So I live in an apartment, so people blast their TVs. You may be hearing the television, sorry about that. But I mean, what are they talking about? Trade wars. What trade war? So what's happening is that the United States now is seeking to balance the trade deficit in taxes with other countries like China, Mexico, Asian nations, all kinds of countries, right? The United States has boosted oil production, even though oil is a little bit high right now. So what does it mean to have tariffs on goods? What does it mean? So everybody's saying, well, the consumer, if we give China tariffs, they're going to retaliate and they're going to charge us tariffs and we're going to have to pay more for goods. Well, they're already charging us tariffs on our goods that we export to China, like raw materials and food. Now that they accept, they never bought rice from us. Now they're buying rice. Well, that's amazing. The United States is the largest exporter of rice in the world. We sell more food than anybody. So now China charges our farmers a tariff to import that rice because China is a huge producer of rice, but the United States was not charging China any tariffs to import their rice into our country. So it's okay for the farmers in China to seek protection from the Chinese government, but it's not okay for the farmers and manufacturers in the United States to seek protection from the government in form of an imbalance of trade. So, the United States government has called for free trade, meaning no tariffs. There are no taxes paid either by any country. Okay, so that's fair enough. That would still hurt the United States because China has lower labor costs, but at least, we're going to agree that there won't be any tariffs. So now, when China needs extra rice and they buy from the United States and we buy rice from China for whatever reason, no one's taxed. All it is just a fair trade. We want 15,000 bushels. We want, it probably goes by tonnage in rice, and that's how they sell it. And all other goods too. Like China. I mean, what does China give to the United States? Like all these stupid cheap products. Things like this are made in China and other countries. Like things like this. All these like something like this, like a souvenir from Philadelphia. This is the Liberty Bell. It says on in 1776, 1970, but it's made in China. You know what I mean? It's not made in the United States. It's a paperweight, but it's nice. It's encased in an acrylic, and there was no tariff on this, guaranteed. So, but the consumer did have to pay a tax. So the big thing is that what people say is, the consumer is going to have to pay the extra money for the tariffs that, China is going to raise the prices of goods. You pay it anyway, my friend. If the United States brings in goods and they're not taxed, they have to find a way of taxing it regardless. You know what I mean? When the United States loses money, what they do is they promise the states a certain amount of money each year for budget. And when the state doesn't get it, the state raises taxes on the citizens. And then the state promises other smaller governments within the state money that the state doesn't collect from the government. So what happens? People pay higher property taxes. So when there's no tax being collected from foreign countries and money's not being taxed like cash, right? There's a lot of cash trade, from illegal aliens, drug dealers, like all these people don't pay tax. Okay, they do say, well, they buy goods and so, but they have to. They need clothes, they need food. If they want to live here and not pay taxes, they still have to dress. What are they going to do, walk around naked? You know what I mean? Have their clothes shipped in from the countries they come from? Give me a break, right? So, what they need to do is they either need to say to other countries, not just China, Russia, the Middle East, Europe, right? They were tariff free for a long time. That's why all these companies move to Mexico, because they don't have to pay taxes. What do you think they go there for? Because they go there, they get cheaper labor, and their goods, when they come back into the United States, are not taxed. But the goods in the United States that go to Mexico are taxed. So, I mean, if you're against this country laying a tax on those other countries, I don't know what you're thinking. Because don't forget, Mexico's population, let's look it up so I don't give you wrong numbers. The population of Mexico has 129 million people versus the United States, 325 million, and probably 75 million illegals living in the country, right? So, Mexico has a lot of people. So, and a lot of these people work cheap. So we allow these companies to leave the country, like Frederick, refrigerated, manufacturing, all these factories leave, we lose jobs and we lose income, because now the people who are not working anymore are not paying taxes to the federal government. And the federal government is being yelled at for simply collecting a tariff from a company that left the United States for cheaper labor and no tax of exporting goods. Because don't forget, when the air conditioning company Frederick, whoever they were, was in the United States and was exporting their air conditioners to Mexico, they were being tariffed. They were taxed. So they says, you know what? We can't take this anymore. We're leaving. We're going to go put our factory in Mexico, and then we can ship all our air conditioners in the United States without tax. We just throw them in trucks and boom, just truck them up and they'll be tax free. And the Mexicans won't have taxes either. So it's a win-win for the company, but not for the American people, because then when the United States loses that labor tax, that labor income, people don't have money, they can't buy anything anymore, right? They're losing their wealth in the United States. The government is losing their wealth. Where are they going to get money? They have to tax your property. That's why we have such insane property taxes, because nobody's paying taxes. Corporations don't pay taxes. We don't get money from tariffs. We keep spending money that the country doesn't have. So we need to make money. And this administration that we have now under Trump realizes that our deficit is growing, and there's no money being generated. See, because we have to generate money in order to pay back the debt that we're incurring to pay for schools, police, all these pensions these politicians get, all this health care they get, all this protection they get costs millions and millions and millions of dollars every year. All the perks that everyone's getting, all the money that these foreign countries get, cost this country millions and billions of dollars every year. And that's why the budget is so high. But if we at least collected a tariff, a little tax from a country like China with 1.5 billion people or more, that would help us out a lot. That would maybe allow us not to borrow so much money, because now we got money coming in. And even from Mexico, now these people all these companies, car companies, any company that moved to Mexico, now they're going to have to pay a tax on everything they sell. Like, let's say they have an air conditioner, $25 each. Every air conditioning unit you bring into the United States is going to cost you $25. every item like this that costs $10 is going to cost you 50 cents, a dollar tax. So if you import a million of these, you got to pay $1 million in tax. That's just the way it is. It's only to offset the imbalance of trade and the insane deficit this country is running into. That's what we need to do. So tariffs are good. The more tariffs we put on, these companies are going to come back into our country, and we're going to export to other countries because it'll be cheaper. They won't have to pay these tariffs to bring the goods into the country. That's why these companies leave the country, because the countries that we export to are taxing us on our goods, and we, the United States, do not tax their goods for whatever reason. You know, for probably the reason being that they complain, oh, you people are so rich, we're such a poor country, we can't afford it. We can't afford it either. You know, when is the breaking point of borrowing money in order to keep everything running? All the schools, all the politicians getting paid, all the transportation they use, all the health cares they use, all the pensions, the insane double dipping pensions they collect. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on of the spending that is happening, and we, the taxpayers, are paying for it, and we're paying it through our property taxes. You know, that's why the government had to put their foot down and say, listen, we're not going to allow anybody else to deduct more than $10,000 on your property taxes. Why? Why should the federal government take your tax burden? Yeah, it's your tax burden. You live in a state, you live in a city, right, that is managed by idiots, that is spending and wasting your money. You know, these politicians in the states, these governors, these senators, these congressmen, mayors, all these people collect pensions, you know, for a minimum of time of service, and they work a minimum of time. So we're paying all these pensions, all this money out, and how do we pay it? Through property taxes. If the government taxed in a fair way, only through a sales tax and perhaps an income tax, we wouldn't have property taxes, we would own our homes, and we would be a lot more free men in the United States than being subject to being property taxed to death. You know what I mean? Like, so if you're paying, let's say you're in a state like New York and New Jersey and California and Washington, you know, all these like high-end liberal states that the taxes are just, property taxes are just insane, right? You could only write off $10,000 a year now. The federal government is not going to take the state's burden of tax. So if you live in a state where your taxes are $20,000, you're paying $10,000 to send illegal aliens' kids to school. You know what I mean? You're paying all these policemen to police illegal aliens, to police criminality, because the less opportunity that's out there, the more criminality you get. The more policing you need, the more money you need, the more jails you need, the more lawyers you need. It's an ongoing thing. So if the United States can at least collect a tariff, right? Let's say like on a cell phone. Don't forget, back in the day when cell phones first came out, Motorola was trying to sell their phone in Japan when Nokia was a big phone, and Nokia in Japan said, no, we're not going to allow any competition from Motorola. But they were allowed to sell their phones in the United States and compete with an American company that made the phones here in the United States. And Motorola, where are they? They're out of business. You know, out of the phone business. I mean, they still sell headphones, and the NFL buys them, and sporting people buy them. But, I mean, the money's in cell phones, right? Here you have a Korean company, LG, Samsung. Are they paying tariffs on all these phones? This phone right here, this is an LG, is $999, $1,000. Is there any tariff on this? I don't know. You know, should there be a tariff? Hell, yeah, there should be. At least $100, $150. If you're willing to pay $1,000 for a phone, $1,500 for an iPhone, or the new Samsung Note 10 is coming out, it's going to be like $1,600 for the top tier one, then you could easily pay another $150 because the phones are financed anyway. So if millions and millions of people buy the new iPhone, the new Samsung Galaxy 10, whatever it is, and pay $1,600. So $150 over 36 months ain't gonna kill anybody. You know, because then you still have to pay sales tax on these phones, right? And that's what a tariff is. So we're not selling, we have a trade imbalance in with other countries taking our goods. So now we're telling them, okay, you don't want to take our goods, right? We don't have a lot of factories in this country anymore. You don't want to take our goods, then we're going to tax you. Oh, but the consumer, you're paying anyway. Because if the government doesn't generate money, you're going to pay it in property tax. The homeowners are going to flip the bill. And you can see, like when you first bought your house years and years ago, your property taxes doubled because inflation of the government continuing to borrow money is doubling, right? And the government doesn't have money to pay for the country's education, to pay for the police, then you have to pay for it yourself out of your own pocket. And that's why people losing their homes. And there was that big, people lose their homes because of that. They can't afford to live in their house because of property tax. Some people pay $2,000 a month in property taxes here in New Jersey. You know, the minimum property tax in New Jersey is $6,800 a year. Now, that's a lot of money for a lot of people. You know what I mean? If you're rich and you make millions and millions and millions of dollars, it doesn't affect you because, you know, you could afford a property tax like that. But a lot of these companies come to the United States and lobby our politicians by way of the stock market to not have their companies that they invest in or they own, and they have companies that they invest here, not pay a tariff or a tax on their goods, and that's why we don't have it. So hopefully this administration stands strong with China and makes them pay tariff, because you know what? You think China is not going to pay the tariff? Think about it. Why would China not pay the tariff? China has to work. You know, we are the United States, like I said earlier, we're about 400 million people, 325 million people documented. The rest are probably not documented. We're consumers. We buy their stuff. Walmart, Target, Home Depot, all these clothing stores, Macy's, Nike. You think Nike pays a tariff? You know what I'm saying? You know, Michael Jordan, or they gave that guy, what's his name? Who did the whole Nike thing, the kneeler. They paid him $15 million, or how much money he got paid. Why? Because they don't pay a tariff. They don't pay tax on sneakers. There's probably no tax. Oh, it's a necessity. People need shoes. You know, let's make it cheaper for everybody. You know, at the expense of who? Somebody's got to pay that tax. Someone's paying it. You know what I mean? And that's what happens. Like all these companies through the stock market, they come in. You know, they force the government to not collect a tariff. You know, with campaign finance promises, all kinds of stuff. So you should support the government telling these countries you're paying a tax if we're paying a tax. You tax us, we tax you. Everybody got to ante up. When you play cards, now nobody in the game is not going to pay and then take the pot. right? And that's what these countries are doing. You know, there's some countries paying, and like China, let's say, for instance, or Mexico, or the European Union, whatever the hell that is, or, you know, like oil companies and all these other countries, we're playing cards and we're the only ones anteing up. These people don't want to ante up, but they want the pot. You know what I'm saying? You can't be like that. You need strong men in Congress to tell these people, listen, you have to pay or we're not paying any tariffs from our exports. And believe it or not, the United States exports a lot of stuff. Machinery, raw material, food, you know, clothing, a lot of stuff this country exports. So the next time anybody tells you that the consumer is going to pay for the tariff that's imposed by this government on another government, they're lying to you, because you're going to pay for it one way or the other. You're going to lose something, you're going to get taxed, and one way or the other, you're going to pay taxes. You know, and when you go buy a house, and when you go buy a house and you look at the property, I say, holy shit, the property taxes are $26,000 a year. How can I afford that house? Well, that's why. That is why, because they're going to tax you. And the easiest way for them to tax you is on your house. Because people who own homes are going to pay to keep their home. What are you going to do? Go out in the street? People who live in apartments or on Section 8, they could give a rat's behind. They could care less who's paying what, because they're not paying. They're actually collecting. They're not out there paying property taxes to pay for the schools and the police. They're actually earning money. Whether you think they're poor or not, whatever the conditions they're in, they're not working, they're collecting money, they're eating, they're clothed, they're safe, their kids are going to school. So who's better off? The people not paying taxes. Than people working to pay taxes to you know, make you think that you're a good citizen. A good citizen will back their country and says, yeah, tell that other guy to ante up. Because when you play cards with people and somebody doesn't ante up, you tell them, oh, put up, ante up, or get out of the game, right? So let's start backing up our government and telling these other countries, put up, ante up, or you're out of the game. And this is Johnny Avanti. Stay tuned for another video. And God bless America. We love you.